Because of my weird streaming schedule, I know that there's a number of people who can only catch my YouTube content. For that, I apologize. But if you're one of those people, you may not know that for the past couple months, I've been doing some sponsored streams for a game called Teppen. This is a card game with the Capcom universe intellectual properties. And what I mean by that is that it's a card game that has characters from like Darksiders, Devil May Cry, Resident Evil, Monster Hunter, and a few others. And it's only on mobile. There's no PC client at the moment, but it is available on Android and iOS. And it's a card game that uses real-time elements. So things are actually happening in real time. There is no like I take a turn and you take a turn. And I've been finding the game increasingly more interesting. So as I've been doing the streams, one of the things that frequently happens, especially with any new game that I pick up, is people say, hey, how do you play this thing? Looks fun, but I have no idea what's going on. And that's actually been happening about once or twice every stream that I have done. So I'm making a video that I can share with you in case you have not tried the game, and that I can share with my Twitch audience as well when they say, how do you play this thing? So that's what this is going to be. I'm going to be going through the basics of Teppen and how you play, what the rules are, etc. And we're going to go ahead and do that now. So this is Teppen, and as I said before, this is a card game that uses Capcom IPs, intellectual properties, for the characters. So we can see Wesker here is on the screen. Also, as I said before, only on mobile devices at the moment, so I'm capturing this from an iPad. You're going to see me looking down a lot as a result. My apologies. And it follows a pretty standard free-to-play model. You can earn things through daily quests, and then you can also purchase things with real money. Of the things that I just wanted to note real quick is that if you only buy like one thing, the season passes that they do are completely worth it, in my opinion. You get a ton of value out of them, and a lot of times you get enough jewels back to almost pay for the next season pass on top of it. So it's a very cost-effective thing if you do all the missions. So if I click on the missions here real quick, I say click, but I'm tapping because it's mobile. There's an area for season pass. Now it says none are available because I've done all of the ones in the current mission, but this will get populated throughout each season. Seasons are traditionally 3 months, and they also coincide with a set. So as of right now, there is a core set, and there's a couple of expansions, and when an expansion comes out, they release a new hero, and then that kind of coincides with that season for, again, roughly 3 months. Now, you might not know what a hero is. We're going to go over that in just a minute. What I'm going to do to show the game off is I'm actually going to jump into a replay of one of my more recent games. And I'm going to do the replay just because there are elements of the game that I want to talk about. And since this is a game that does utilize real-time elements, it's going to be far easier for me to pause things and explain them so that you have context. So I'm just going to jump into the replays. Also, thank you, card games that put replays in your system. I love being able to go back and look at what happened, get me playing a little bit better. You might hear the audio do that a bit, and that's because of one of my cords, so for that I apologize. Alright, so before anything else even loads up, I want to pause it here, and I want to talk about some key things on the screen. Number one, you always have a hand of 5 cards when you start, and you're going to see here in a minute that there's like an option to mulligan. I don't remember if I mulliganed in this game or not, but when you mulligan, you swap them all or not. There's no one by one like in other card games. You swap your entire hand. Now, your hero is the character on the left, and your opponent's hero is the character on the right. Currently in the game, there are a number of heroes. Heroes also correspond with a color. So I'm playing Nair Gigante, I believe is how it's pronounced. I always slaughter this poor dragon's name, but it's from Monster Hunter World, if you're familiar with that game. And I'm playing against a Chun-Li deck. Now, each hero also has like a special power. So when you choose a hero, you're basically choosing 2 things in this game. One is like colors for your deck, and then the other is a power. And again, every hero has up to 3 powers that you can choose from when you're building your deck. You'll see them in action here in a moment. The one that I'm playing very specifically is a power that gives me a bonus when I use cards that sacrifice my own health. So, left, where I'm tapping here, right? This is my hero, my opponent's hero, and these are my starting hand choices. You'll also notice there's a 5-minute timer up here. This is a hard timer. So at most, Games will only ever take 5 minutes of game time. Now, they can bleed over because the clock does technically stop when you enter what's called active response, and that'll make sense here in a bit. But all right, that's the basics there right out of the gate. Well, let's go ahead. More basics. You're gonna see some numbers now. So this right here, this is health, okay? 30 and 30. You always start at 30 health. Below that, you're also gonna see the number that kind of looks like it's by a deck here, this 25. So that is cards left in deck, and that's 5 cards in hand, 25 in deck, so you might have figured it out. 30 cards is what makes up your total deck size. Now, the last pieces that you're now seeing are your resource, right? So it's called MP. That's this bottom bar here. You start the game at 4, and you can see that it goes up to what's a max of 10. Now, if you're playing a single color deck, there are 4 colors in the game. There is black, purple, red, and green. If you're playing a single color deck, you can play cards that cost all the way up to 10. If you go to a 2-color deck, the way the game balances is that you can only play cards that cost 5 or less. And if you are a madman or woman that wants to go down to a 3-color deck, then you cap at 3 MP total. So, absolute insanity. Now, this bar, when the game begins, you're going to see starts filling up over time. This is part of the real-time component because, again, there are no turns. You are playing this in real time. This charges over time, and then you get to play a card. Most of the cards in the game are units, and then you also have like actions or spells. Units go into one of these 3 slots. When you place a unit there, it will start attacking, and you'll notice that because you're going to see an arrow go towards the opponent, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Actions are what trigger active response. We'll talk about that when that comes up as well. But those are your 2 different kinds of card types. There are basically units and then actions. Now, the last thing I want to highlight here, now that we've got into the game, is that you can see there's this extra kind of resource or meter here, right? Mine says 0 AP of 20. My opponent says 0 of 15. This is how you use your hero power. This game, they call it hero art because the art you choose during deck building determines the power you get. So it also might be a hero art as in a martial art, but the game calls them hero arts. So the way that you get this resource is by playing cards, and you'll see that here in a moment. You get an amount equal to the cost of the card. So like if I play this Tyrant, for example, then this goes up by 4. And if I play, again, this Burn Dino Rex, then it goes up by 3. You can also, while you're in the game, if you tap on your hero or your opponent's hero, once you're in the game, you can see what their chosen hero art is for the game. Now, right now, the way they've designed it, once you see the hero and then also see the number, if you have them memorized, you'll know exactly what you're playing against because each of the activations are unique for each hero. So there's no second hero art that costs 15 for Chun-Li, for example. So if you see 15, you know that it's Yawn. In this case, again, I'm playing the one that's called Spike Launch, and it says that you split damage equal to the sacrificed life points to all enemy units up to 12 points of damage. So as I said before, my current hero art in my deck is built around this idea of playing powerful cards that normally have a drawback of you have to sacrifice health to play them, but then in doing so, I'm also powering up my hero art. So like an example here is this Alexia Ashford says, when played, sacrifice 3 life. Similarly here, Gate has when played, sacrifice 2 life. Normally, you're sacrificing that life as a trade-off for getting a powerful effect at a low cost, but in this case, we're also powering up his ability to then damage my opponent's board later on. All right, so basics. Again, MP you're going to see charging at the bottom. We've got units that we can play in the 3 slots, etc., etc. Let's go ahead and advance this just a little bit more, right? So a lot of times early in the game, you'll see like a bit of a pause as people try to figure stuff out. So at this point, I recognize immediately that this is going to be a 2-color deck because this is a purple card and Chun-Li is green. So I know that just from this one play, all the cards in my opponent's deck are going to cost 5 or less. Now, you're also going to see that red arrow from my opponent. As I said before, you play a card and then an arrow will start moving towards the other side of the board. This represents their attack. It takes 10 seconds for standard units to get their arrow across the board. Now I say standard units because there are abilities like slow or agility that makes the arrows either faster or slower, but your standard timing is 10 seconds. When that arrow gets to the other side of the board, if it's an empty slot like right now, it deals its damage to me. If there's a unit there, it deals damage to the unit, and the unit retaliates with whatever its attack power is, unless you have some sort of special ability. So for example, flying units don't take retaliatory damage, and they also auto deal the damage to your opponent, right? Think of that as like evasion or like flying from Magic the Gathering. I'm going to go ahead and unpause it now so we can see some things going. I believe I go for a block here. All right, so a couple of things happen, right? Well, let's go ahead and get it all the way. Okay, so one, I played a unit, and in doing so, I would have been entering combat with this player. But at the last second, so this is where the real-time part comes into play. This is a beautiful example. At the last second, right before that arrow was going to crash into my unit, my opponent played an action. And so it stops the clock, and instead we get this 10 seconds that's on the board. This is what's called active response. Anytime an action is played, it like stops the game, it pauses it, and you get this back and forth between players where they can now only play actions during the active response. And it's first in, last out sort of ordering, right? So my opponent is going to be playing this flight card. If I had any actions as well, then I could play them in response here. With my current hand, I don't, so this is just going to end up resolving. But you can do this back and forth, and I think there are some that come up later. Now, another thing I want to highlight is when you enter active response, both players also get a bonus amount of MP to play cards. That's highlighted by this blue down here. So before I was at 4, but because my opponent played an action, during this active response, I jump up to 6. When you spend MP, it takes from the bonus first, so it always takes from the blue. And this is very important because of a couple of factors. Number one, during deck building, it means any actions that cost 2 or less are potentially very important because you can play them for free without using your normal resource, your normal meter, as long as you play it during an active response period. So things that cost 2 or less can sometimes just be a nice benefit. Even if they're low impact, the fact that you're almost getting them for free kind of increases their value at times, because if your opponent plays an action, you get to do it for free sort of thing. Also in this game, whenever you play a card, it gets immediately replaced by a card in your hand. Again, because it's real time, there are no turns. So there is no traditional, you draw a card at the beginning of your turn. It's when you play a card, you then draw a card and it fills one of your slots. Some effects will let you draw into additional slots. That's called the EX pocket, the extra pocket here. Those cards just kind of hang out over there. They do not replace themselves. When you play a card out of the pocket, you don't draw a new one necessarily, but it is a way for you to kind of save additional resources for use later. There's some effects that also interact with cards specifically in the pocket as well. But overall, when you play a card, it replaces with a card, and that also means that when you're playing these free actions that cost 2 or less during active response, you are cycling through your deck faster. So a lot of strategy there. Now the last piece, and the other reason it's really important, is you can do some kind of like psychological baiting sometimes to use the active response bonus MP to ramp into more expensive actions. And what I mean by that is that if you are at, let's just say 4 MP, and you really need to play an action that costs 5 MP in a certain amount of time because of the attack timers, and you know that if you wait until your meter charges till 5, it's going to be too late. But you also happen to have an action that costs 1. You can play the action that costs 1, so you go from 4 to 3, but it starts this active response. And then you also get the bonus 2 MP, so you go to 5. Now, you only get to play your second action if your opponent takes the bait. So because there's this back and forth nature, right? My opponent has played, in this example here, this flight card. if I don't play any actions, they don't get to play anything else during active response. But if I had an action in hand right now and I played it, they would have an opportunity to play another action. So you can use that sometimes to your benefit to bait and kind of get a mini ramp, get one extra bonus MP at times during this period. So I know I've thrown a lot at you. I promise it's going to make more sense as we go. But this is kind of the basics of active response. Again, right now it's just going to resolve. I don't have any actions in my hand. So let's go ahead and just watch the flight resolve, and then we're going to go here to combat now. Because they gave this flying, when the opponent's arrow hit my creature, again, flight makes it so you always on attack hit your opponent and not the opposing unit. So I took 2 damage, my unit did not retaliate, and their unit didn't take any damage as well. Now when my blue arrow here gets to here, it will still deal damage to that. My arrow attacking into a flying unit hits the unit. It's just when a flying unit is attacking an opponent, it kind of ignores the unit there. So we're gonna watch this go. Now my opponent again plays an action. It's just gonna go ahead and resolve because again I don't have any actions to counter with. Oh! So, if you're wondering what happened here, I played another unit on top of my unit, and that's called Ascended. This is a brand new mechanic that came out with the most recent set as of recording this. And so this Ascended mechanic here, you get an Ascended unit when you play it on top of an existing unit. Normally, you have to play a unit in an open slot, so if your board is full, you can't play any more units until something dies. However, units with Ascended go on top of a unit. They basically kill or sacrifice the unit that they are replacing, but then you also get a bonus effect. So the one that I played, for example, destroys a random enemy unit with an MP cost of 5 or less. So if you're wondering what happened, I played Alexia and then it nuked my opponent's unit, and now they're going to be using an action to deal damage to my unit and heal a bit. Now they were intending to use that action to kill my Tyrant, right? Because my Tyrant only had that 1 health. But again, real time sometimes messes with things. I've certainly won some games and lost some games based on timing. And so because I had played Alexia right when they were also releasing that spell, mine was just a couple of frames ahead, and it kind of feels like a wasted spell there. So again, you can use this to your advantage because you can do some really interesting things with combat and baiting and so forth. So here, my opponent, they played a unit. When this comes into play, it inflicts seal. Think like Silence from other games. So it just takes any abilities off of my unit. We're going to see combat resolve. When this red arrow hits me, it's going to deal 2 to my unit, but because of retaliation, it's going to kill this unit.
My spirit burns.
Unless... So they're using this to deal 2 damage, and so now they're going to trade with each other. So I play a unit, again, 10 seconds till it gets across. And it gets there. My opponent plays another unit. Now they have enough to play their hero art. And when you do that, that also has an animation, and it kind of like stops time. So at some point, I believe we get to see them do that. If not, I know for a fact I end up using mine at some point. So you're just kind of seeing the trades back and forth. This ability or this status here is called Halt. When you see this timer, so this unit when on the field, excuse me, not this unit, the previous unit, when it dies, it halts the unit that was in front of it. And then this unit has the Ascended status, so it killed the other unit, which then triggered its death effect. And then it's when on the field, -1 battle damage taken by friendly units excluding stealth. So like it protects other units, but then I play another Alexia to nuke that. My hero art is now online. You can see it highlighted here. As of right now, I've sacrificed 8 total health between Alexias and other cards that I've played. So if I were to use this, it will deal 8 damage spread across the units on my opponent's side of the board. So right now I'm getting damage in because they're unblocked. And so this unit comes down and I target this with Betrayal. So this is a card that's going to destroy it and make them discard stuff. So this is a great example. I'm actually going to back this up and then fast forward to that here real quick. I'm sorry that there's not like a, unfortunately with the replays, there's not like a jump back 5 seconds thing, but I really want to highlight because this is a much better example of the active response back and forth, if you will. So we're just going to speed ahead. Just all the place. So the thing that I want to highlight here is that I target their unit, and then because I've played an action, they have the opportunity to respond. And so they're going to respond by saving their unit and making it jump to their pocket. Alright, so again earlier, this was the one that had the on death inflicts halt. Halt is like a stun, basically. Now, because this is a real-time game, you can see it says halt for 13 seconds. So that's where that little hourglass comes from. So they take the Ascension, halts my unit. I play the Alexia, which nukes theirs. So we're going to go back to normal time. So again, so I'm targeting this with Betrayal. It's supposed to destroy this unit and make them discard all copies of it from their deck. Now my opponent responds with their own action, and then at that point I have no other responses in my hand, so this is going to end up resolving. But this returns this friendly green unit from the board to their own EX pocket, and then they gain health. So I tried to destroy it. They save their unit and gain some health as a response. The big reason for doing that is that this unit now not only is not destroyed, but the rest of them are not discarded from their deck. Now they still have to replay that unit. So they play this unit, but I'm still pressuring basically on all sides of the board at this point. I've done a good job of trying to keep their board free. So they're using a card here. This card that they're playing resets your stats back to their base. You can see that my numbers here, they're highlighted green, and those represent anytime your units have been buffed. So when this resolves, it means that my unit goes back to being a 2/5. Alright, so this right here, this animation is me using my hero art. Now, I knew, because I'd already hit the max of 12, I knew that it was going to do 12 damage split across the enemy units. They had less than 12 total combined health, so I knew for a fact this was going to be a clean sweep with my opponent only at 8 health and all of these units attacking. I felt like this was a pretty solid use of the hero art because it was just going to secure a victory. I didn't think they'd be able to get blockers in.
Count me out yet.
My opponent realized it and they surrendered. So that's like a quick look at the basics, if you will. Again, attack arrows, MP charging in real time. We can jump into another one where I'm up against Chun-Li here. Gonna do a little less pausing for this one and more just commentating as it goes, so you can kind of get a better feel of the pacing as far as real time goes, because it really is important. The timing is important because you can wait till, you know, the split second before an arrow is about to hit an empty spot, for example, and then play a blocker, and in doing so deny that damage, but also, because of the way active response works, if you do it right at the split second, your opponent might not be able to respond to the unit in time to clear it out of the way. So timing very much matters. Now, another reason that I wanted to pick this one is I wanted to highlight one other thing that I really enjoy about this game. One of the reasons that I find it interesting is that in a traditional card game, where you have turns, there's almost always some sort of ramp mechanic. So what I mean by that is the ability to increase your resources to play more expensive cards. In Hearthstone, in Magic, and the Elder Scrolls Legends, all these games have that. Teppen has it as well. So when you look at cards like Iris or Layer, you can see this MP Boost 30, MP Boost 50. This increases how fast your MP meter, this meter down here, charges. So this is how you play ramp in this game. But it's only an effect while they're on the board. So in my opinion, it ends up being a bit more balanced than traditional ramp because it's not like a permanent increase. You can play around it a lot better. Also, the units tend to be less intimidating. They usually have high health. This is another ramp unit, for example. Well, we're seeing their hero art animation, but this is another one as well. Low attack, high health, but MP. Now, some units have other pretty neat effects. For example, this G adult here says whenever it takes damage, it places a G young on the field, and that's what these things are. So the young are just 2/2s, but when they enter the field, they deal 1 damage to the enemy hero. So essentially, this unit has high health, low attack, but it's just a meat shield that makes all these little units that block and get chip damage in. I'm a big fan of this particular card. Now, what's interesting is resource management in this game is incredibly key as well, because the last thing that you want to do is find yourself in a position where you're going through one of these back and forths, like you can see my opponent and I doing right now. This particular active response is now up to the 4th card that we've played. This only happens if you have resources to spend. If you keep spending all of your MP on the first playable cards that you have, and your opponent does something, the likelihood of you being able to properly respond is very low. So getting used to the ebb and the flow of these matches is very important. As you can see, I'm trying to basically like super pump this G adult. So this resolves, and then this resolves again. So I've turned this thing into a monstrous 7/12 now, but unfortunately my opponent has the answer. That card that we saw in the previous game where it resets health and attack to previous values shut down my beautiful and glorious plan. So my hero art is now online. As I've said before, the other animation was the Chun-Li. This is mine. When this happens, as you can see, it stops time and it resolves, but it's not like actions. Your hero arts don't trigger active response. And that's also really important because you can use that to your advantage. If you expect your opponent is going to try to respond to something that you're doing, sometimes you can sneak in your hero art and it kind of interrupts their timing, right? Interrupts their cycle, so. A lot of back and forth. The list that I'm playing against in this particular example is one that utilizes those ramp cards, and then this hero art also gives you bonus MP when the unit that you use your hero art on dies. So this is basically like a ramp deck. A bunch of cheap, low-cost things that increase your MP, increase your resources, and then you play big, expensive beaters. My list looks like it's falling behind here at the 14 health, but it's because it's entirely designed to hurt itself. And the lower my health gets, the stronger I become. Specifically, not just because of my hero art, which is now fully charged, but there are also some cards like this that get bonus stats if my health is low when it's played. So right now, you can see that card comes down because I've hit that magical 10 health. And there's this, again, like ebb and flow. So that was a beautiful example just that occurred down here as well, in that I was trying to trade my unit into theirs. They let one arrow resolve, so it got my unit low, and then when my arrow was about to hit theirs, they just used the ascended mechanic to replace that unit with another that was at full health. And so I lost a unit, and they basically did not. I mean, they still lose the unit they ascended, but because they're getting the benefits of the other Ascended unit, it worked out very well for them. And so things start to look pretty dire at this point in this match. Again, because I've only got the 8 health. However, last second timing there, I get the block, as you can see. And then the death effect killed the other unit for my opponent. And this is where, as I said before, my deck starts to kind of shine because it's designed to be at low health. It powers up a bunch of things when it's at low health. Using my hero art here again to deal 12 damage spread across their board. I'm just trying to wrestle control away from my opponent at this point. But hopefully you're kind of getting an idea of how the pacing of the game goes. Like I said, I'm trying to pause much less this time around so you can see exactly what the pacing is like. You can kind of see how the timing matters. Now, if this is still a little too fast for you, you can always just pause this. This is a YouTube video after all. This looks, again, pretty dire, but because I played this card, I turn on my hero art. And I'm going to use this to save my life, essentially, by getting rid of one of those units. Blocking one. It's looking pretty grim, but we're going to pull this out. Now, one of the other things that I want to highlight that I really enjoy about Teppen is, as I said before, the match timer here ensures that you're not going to get stuck in like a half-hour game. I know some folks really like long card games, and that's fine. But when you're on the go, there's, I think, something comforting knowing that, you know, if I've only got, you know, a 5-minute commute and I'm on the train or something, I can play a game comfortably and not feel bad about having to abandon it or leave it. So even when the games go long, you know that there's like a cap on the amount of time that you can actually spend in a game. As I said before, active response makes it slightly more than the 5 minutes, but when you get to 0 on the match timer, the person with the highest health then wins at that point. So that does kind of create some strategies as you get to the end game where you can play to get the win based on time. There are some decks that I've played against where that's their entire goal. They do nothing but just heal and stall and try to get chip damage in. Like, they try to win 28-30, basically. It's a bit absurd, but they do exist. So again, hero arts back and forth. Now, after this game, I'm going to go into the deck builder and show you a bit more of what I mean by hero arts, so you can see some examples. I'm also going to show you like the 4 different colors and give you a pretty quick overview of that as well. This game is almost over, by the way, so it's not that much longer. We'll let you see the conclusion. This was pretty thrilling with me down to my 3 health here, but we pulled out the win, so. Love the animations. As I said before, Capcom intellectual properties, there's going to be some familiar faces you'll see popping up on the cards and in the hero arts. So if I come over here, we're just going to say edit deck, but we're gonna actually pick new deck here, like we're building. So when you're building a deck, the first thing you do is you select your hero and then the hero art. Currently, as I'm recording this in the game, we have Ryu, Rathalos. So Ryu's from Street Fighter. This is from Monster Hunter World. We have X, Chun-Li. We have Morrigan from Darksiders and Dante from Devil May Cry. And then we have Wesker and Nair Gigante. And these also represent the colors, right? So red, green, purple, black. Those are the 4 colors in the game. Now, after that, we have Jill, who was the hero introduced with the first expansion, Nero, who came with the second, and Akuma, who came with the third. They just announced that it's going to be Zero coming in the next expansion as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. And Zero is going to be a purple hero. So by the time this comes out, essentially all of the colors will have 3 heroes, or if this video gets released a little bit before the expansion comes out, then you just got to wait a couple days. But for the most part, every color is roughly going to have 3 heroes to work with. Now, as I said before, you pick your hero and then you pick your hero art. So Ryo here has this Shinku Hadouken, but he's also got this one, right? So this one here, you can see the AP cost here. It's 18 and it deals 7 damage to an enemy unit. Or this one costs 22, but it adds 2 damage to friendly units that are in your hand and in your pocket. So this is like a big hand buff. And then over here, this gives combo to a friendly unit. And if you don't know what combo is, it makes it deal damage twice when attacking. So it doesn't deal damage twice in retaliation, but when it's attacking, it hits like a truck. And this one is cheap. So this is the sort of hero art you might want to use with an aggressive deck, for example. This one is something you might want to use kind of like as a combo. I've seen some folks use it in combination with a keyword called Rush. So in this game, because everything's real time, there is no summoning sickness or waiting a turn to attack, but there is a keyword called Rush, and what Rush does is it makes your attack arrow start significantly closer to the enemy. And so if you use this hero art and you have a bunch of Rush units, sometimes you can use that to get burst damage because it's harder for your opponent to respond to Rush units. Not impossible, there's still a window for response, but that sort of thing. And the different heroes have different themes. So X here is all about health, right? So this one grants health to a friendly unit. This one says anytime that you boost health, then that gives +1 attacks to all friendly units. And then this one gives Veil, which makes it so that they can't be targeted to all friendly units. So trying to hit it there. There we go. Prevents targeting by an opponent's action cards and hero art. So that's what Veil does. So X here is all about protection, for example, is their theme. Wesker here is destruction. Here it destroys an enemy unit. This is Ouroboros, and this is like Reanimator, if you will. So again, pretty cool themes all throughout each of the heroes. And when you're building a deck, you pick one. Let's just, since we're here, we'll grab Wesker. So you do this, you come into the deck interface, and then as I said before, it is 30 cards in a deck. You can put up to 3 copies of any one card in your deck with the exception of legendaries. Legendaries are only a copy of 1. Now, normally if I'm building a Wesker deck, I would come here and I'd start with the black cards. But as I said before, you can put up to, so click on the green here, 3 different colors in your deck. But it does also make it so that your maximum MP goes way, way down. Now, as you're going through here, the easiest way to kind of tell things apart are units have the attack and the health, right? These here. And then any of your actions or things like that do not have an attack or a health. So you can click on any of these. Well, I say click, but just tap. Again, I'm on mobile. To see what the cards do. If they reference certain mechanics, for example, then you can also tap on that and it will give you an explanation of the mechanic. For some of the cards, I'll scooch down here a bit. They might create a secondary card. And if that's the case, then usually you can also see what the secondary card is as well. Trying to get to the Tyrant to give you that example. Here we go. So here on death, it places a Super Tyrant on the same board slot. So this unit is really interesting. It's a 2/5 with slow. So this takes twice as long to attack, basically. But once it dies, and there's plenty of ways to sacrifice stuff in black, you get a Super Tyrant in its place. And the Super Tyrant here has agility and combo and is a 2/8. So it attacks twice as fast. And then when it's attacking, it deals its damage twice. So you start with a weak unit, and then when it dies, you get a really, really strong unit. It's pretty neat. So overall, that's like a quick summary, right? Attack timers, arrows matter. The active response thing absolutely matters. And hero art choices, knowing what they do, again, something you want to pay attention to. The last thing that I want to point out, I'm not going to go into all the different game modes or things for this video. I just really wanted to cover like how you play. But the last thing I want to point out is that if you enjoy tournaments and like a competitive, scene, if you will, if you're one of those folks that always wanted that in the Elder Scrolls Legends, or you really enjoyed the Masters series, Teppen does have a pretty decent competitive scene already. They've recently announced this year's Road to the World Championships. They had a World Championship last year. If you have not seen it, if this is your first time checking out Teppen, I highly recommend going and watching the World Championship YouTube video from last year. It was a lot of fun. It was in Tokyo. There was a lot of prizes. The world champion won a car and I think it was $267,000 US. I mean, it was like 30 million yen, but converting to US, it was like $267,000, which is a mind-blowing figure to me for a mobile game like this. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions, you can always certainly ask them in a stream. If you can't catch me live, you can hop into my Discord and ask me questions there. I am actually enjoying the game, and I'm looking forward to doing some more with it in the future. So anyway, thanks for watching, and hopefully I will catch you watching future videos.